let's try to pick up the pace here, because it's a lot to cover. He talks about the talk shows, everything from Arsenio Hall, where he who was like the first major black, but the Joan Rivers show, Johnny Carson, to the modern day talk shows, where he said they're public relations, promos, and propaganda. But one thing, he really went hard on Arsenio Hall, because he stated that from Arsenio Hall making a lot of anti-black jokes and racist jokes that Johnny Carson or Joan Rivers or other late night talk hosts who were contemporaries with him could never make. Which one joke he was fond of making is talking about Ethiopian starvation, you know, making light of especially in the 80s of the conflicts in Biafra and the other atrocities, where Del Jones said he watched Arsenio Hall and never saw a Holocaust joke, but the atrocities that African people suffered were fair game for Arsenio Hall, which is something that black people didn't really have to see coming from the white host, because it was just untouchable for a white, but they hired black Arsenio Hall. But another thing that he said that Arsenio Hall constantly did in that era of the early 90s was provide a platform for white people doing black art. And just a few of the guests that he had on was the Rolling Stones, Eric Clapton, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, Kenny G, Beastie Boys, David Cos, Madonna, New Kids on the Block, Vanilla Ice. They said that because in the 90s, if you were around in that area, if you were doing Arsenio, I mean, De La Soul went on Arsenio and got dissed by Arsenio Hall, and they rapped about it for the next 20 years, because that's how influential KRS-One. A lot of if you made it, once you hit Arsenio's stage, you had made it. That was crossover gold. So as he was giving an opportunity, a chance to black artists, he was also validating culture bandits. He also talked about, let's just talk about Coming to America. He talked about Arsenio Hall was one of the co-stars, or the co-star of Coming to America. And Del Jones was very frustrated that Coming to America was received so openly and non-critically by the black community. First thing he said about Coming to America is that it portrayed a feudal Africa, a stereotypical Africa where, you know, you could rape your servants and this opulence. And we all understood, especially in the 80s and 90s, the decolonial era and the era of neocolonialization and proxy wars between the communist white boy and the capitalist white boy. There was a lot of upheaval in Africa. And at that same time, they're showing the rulers were living fat. The rulers were selling out Africa piecemeal to their former colonizers and the new up-and-coming colonizers such as China, the Soviet Union, and India. And hell, even Brazil and even Canada was getting in on the hustle at that time. So he said that was extremely deliberate and conscious. Also, Eddie Murphy did not write that script. So when you had a black man telling his African queen, bark like a dog, jump up on one leg, and the African women and the African king joking with his son about how he sleeps with his bathers, disrespecting his queen, literal queen, and then Coming to America and the colorism in that, the dark-skinned female characters are sexually aggressive, and the fair-skinned ones are ladylike and nurturing. All of that wasn't written by Eddie, because we know our down-home sense of humor. It was written by David Sheffield and Barry Bloughton, or Bloughton, Blautein, who are both Jewish heritage. And it was directed by John Landis, the same guy that directed all of Michael Jackson's Thriller and all of his big high production value. The same team, where you got black folks up front, all black on the surface, and we thinking, wow, this is black. This is us. When it was a couple of white dudes that sat down and wrote all them black jokes. And Eddie Murphy made it happen. He made it digestible, made it palatable for us. He also talks about the black award shows. He also says that, I don't know if this is still true, everything, Essence Award, Soul Train Award, BTT Awards. He said that white PR firms organize it, white corporations fund it, and all the award winners, Even NAACP, even the highest awards from the NAACP is named after Joseph Spingard, the Spingard Award, a white guy. It's all white folks. So you got that beautiful, it's like angel food cake with chocolate icing. Black chocolate on the surface and white on the core. And so when we consume those media products, when we participate in those media events, we have to be conscious. You can't turn your brain computer off and just relax. You can enjoy it, but enjoy it with a conscious and deliberate analysis and understanding. He talks about the significance of the cowboy mentality and the cowboy movies and why that was so necessary, and how the cowboy movie genre morphed into the renegade cop genre, which was all white propaganda. But I mean, it's check it out for the books. But I mean, it's kind of obvious how the cowboy, we go from John Wayne to Dirty Harry, and what that means. But he also said that we have to scrape the decadence off our culture. We can't be just enthusiastic participants and consumers and producers of our culture. We have to refine our culture. Dale Jones states African culture is as vast as the universe. It is easier to define those things that are not African, for there are less of them. There are more things that are African that aren't African in the universe of human understanding, human consciousness. To clarify, the decadence that is stuck to our culture, strangling it and keeping it from growing and serving the race. Only the contrary is to be used as on the contrary, it is used as a weapon to keep us imprisoned in the guts of insanity. We're involved with idol worship of people in the performing arts as if they are the true carriers of the culture. Even those who demonstrate some consciousness lay up in madness. So the decadence of our culture is not eating too much chocolate or showing a little too much thigh. The decadence of our culture is how any manifestations of our culture that do not defend us, uplift us, advance us. Any elements of our culture. And so that doesn't, like I said, you can be fully clear. It's not a decadence of morality or chastity versus it is the decadence of something being so perverted or warped that it no longer serves its fundamental purpose, which is to encapsulate, secure, and advance the people. And we have to scrape the decadence off our culture. And a lot of these people, some of the best producers of our culture, are the best representatives of our culture, are also some of its greatest liabilities. The people who open our culture up from penetration and not just destruction, but exploitation and extraction by our oppressors. Some other people that he talks about is Sammy Davis Jr. If you're a fan of The Cosby Show, you'll know that early on in the production of that show, Sammy Davis Jr. died. And every single episode, Bill Cosby wore a Sammy Davis Jr. pin. Every episode, he had on that pin on his sweater. And Sammy Davis Jr. was introduced to the world performing in blackface. He was a Satanist. He has his biography, Why Me? He lays it all out. If he was nothing, you can't say Sammy wasn't honest about his flaws and shortcomings. But he was very happy to play minstrel and second fiddle. Go back and watch the original Rat Pack movies, But he was was considered the world's greatest entertainer at that time. But he did not represent us well. And when the struggle came, when the revolution came, he kept his head down until it was safe to come up. A lot of Negroes did. Some black people that aren't even associated with being political, Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier, they put their careers on the line. Some went a lot further, like Paul Robeson. But a lot of our beloved celebrities, especially our elder celebrities, they went into hiding, just like a lot of celebrities went into hiding during the 2020 rebellion. A lot of them went into hiding the entire civil rights movement. And then when they started giving out Nobel Peace Prizes and the civil rights activists started sitting in the Oval Office across from presidents, that's when these Negroes emerged and say, okay, it's okay to be black. James Brown waited to the 70s. Remember, James Brown said that black people shouldn't riot after Dr. King's death that we need to calm it down. But then he came out later to rebuild his image. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. And at the same force he sang, sing it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, he come out with living in America. You know, nobody can take away from their talents. I don't even feel comfortable talking about these icons, but the truth is the truth, and we can't keep repeating these cycles. We are at war, so nobody should be free of scrutiny. But he talked about Sammy Davis Jr. And these are books he said we should read about these icons so we can understand the war of culture. That the war of our culture is embodied in these biographies. Sammy Davis Jr.'s book, Why Me, his biography. Miles Davis, Miles, the biography. Nina Simone, I Put a Spell on You. This is another militant, angry, powerful black woman that ran to the white man's embrace. You know, she was able to articulate the pain that our oppressors was putting us through, but at the same time, that's where she felt most comfortable. I mean, but she was a classically trained, a fluent pianist, Juilliard. I mean, she was upper crust. So that contradiction, addiction and madness comes from that contradiction. But her book, I Put a Spell on You. And The Temptation, Deliver Us from Temptation. Those are 4 books that Del Jones said you should read to give you greater depth and insight. He talks about sports. Woo! How much we got on sports? How we doing on time? Woo! Okay, I'll try to pick up the pace. About halfway. He says about sports. Excuse me. Our warrior spirit is misused in the service of the very system that keeps us in bondage. Our warrior spirit must be expressed, and our madness, it is expressed against each other with swift violence. We are out of control. Our toes are tenderer when another African steps on them. Our patience is shorter when dealing with another blood. Our word is not as good as the pledges we give to the military, police, private industry. Our blood seldom spills for African causes, but runs freely for their maintenance of global white supremacy. We are indeed insane. I mean, what more needs to be? I mean, that is just the intro to the chapter on sports. Because there are our gladiators, as Del Jones called them, our modern day gladiators, the biggest, baddest brothers on the planet, from the heavyweight champs to the NBA superstars to the NFL Super Bowl MVPs. And all that strength, all that might goes from being an asset of our people to an asset of our enemies. But let me read a little bit more on that statement because it's very powerful. This is not to say that we are the only people who suffer from this malady as white supremacy perverts life. I just want us to realize that we still have a long journey. Our resilience has been amazing from this Our resilience has been amazing for us and frightening to them. Many times they thought they had us buried under their bullshit, and they were/are wrong. So, our power, even though it gets perverted and misdirected and distorted, it's there and it has sustained us. So, and we are not the first people to fall to colonization, enslavement, oppression. In fact, our time in colonization, slavery, and oppression has been relatively short-lived compared to other people. So, if we're going to do a comparative analysis, but we still have to acknowledge these harsh truths, not as a put down, but as a diagnosis so that we can get the proper treatment and solutions. Del Jones talks about how sports represents nationalism, militarism. He goes into detail about the 1992 Dream Team, how the United States brought its professional players to play against Olympic athletes, and how the U.S., all these black men went on this field to humiliate black players. One game specifically when the Dream Team was playing against Angola. And you know, Angola was a land that just had a bloody fight for black liberation, for decolonization. And Barkley was up there throwing elbows and committing flagrant fouls against these African brothers. You had these African basketball players being literally humiliated, losing by 50 or more points. And even though normally when you have such a great lead, you take your starters off and you let your bench players say, I don't even know anything about sports, but I know that. But they had these players, these African Olympic teams, totally humiliated, and the players would go out there and disgrace these Africans because, you know, the black men that they own are better than the black men that they don't have direct ownership of. Dale Jones states that our biggest athletes are employed by solid races, and they can be taken down as fast as Mike Tyson, Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali, or Paul Robeson, and any others who make white boys unhappy. Our people know this shit. We need to stop bullshitting ourselves. The role models they promote are those of glorified employees who still don't own anything. This was written in the early 90s, and he could have put Kaepernick on that list. Don't matter how many championship rings or whatever, they own them. And they built them up. And that's why we have to really determine who our heroes are. In fact, I say this often. Any standards, all of our standards of values, whether you're saying this makes this person a worthy mate, a worthy person to look up to or admire, or even a worthy friend, none of what makes us worthy or unworthy in each other's sight should be directly related to what they can provide or take away from us. All of our worth needs to be inherent. If we ain't got nothing better than just our word to each other, or our mastery of our local lingo, whatever we have internally that is under our direct, deliberate, and ongoing control should be the standard of value, should be the yardstick for measuring worth of African people. Nothing that, I went out and the white man gave me a good job, white man gave me a title, white man gave me a ton of money, white man gave me a mortgage on a mansion and a lease on a fancy car. I ain't saying you shouldn't have those things, you didn't work for those things, but that should not be what we use to measure your value to the collective. Because anything, if we allow that to be it, they can hand select, as they have been hand selecting, who our heroes are and aren't. Moving on. Movies are the manipulation of madness. He lists 6 genres of movies we should be mindful of. The horrors of the hood movies, from like Precious, the jokes on us comedy flicks that degrade black folks, that laugh at us or have us laughing at our own suffering. The plenty of action, no plot movies that you think are just mindless explosions, like Transformers, that send a very deep message. The salt and pepper pig movie, oh my goodness, where you got a black cop, white cop, I'm too old for this shit. Integration cinema is another one, and black and gold. What was that? I have to check the book. What was that? There's one I missed. That's not 6, that's 5. You might have to get the book for that. That's our mystery point. Because are almost looking at me like, dude, you said this would be 30 minutes. But say he does list some positive films that he wants you to watch. He wants you to watch South Central. He says that that's a positive. With Boys in the Hood. John Singleton's first movie was really positive, even though he hated his second movie, Poetic Justice, with Janet Jackson and Tupac. Daughters of the Dust, Sugarcane Alley, which is a foreign flick, and Quilombo. Those are 5 movies that he definitely wants us to watch. He also talks about the very first blockbuster ever, Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith. That was the first ever blockbuster and basically laid the foundation for not just methods in movies, but how well movies can be used as weaponized culture. He also talks about counter-revolutionary films in this text. One of the things he goes into great detail about is Serafina, which is the anti-apartheid South African play that was adopted into the movie. And he talked about he went to see this play performed in Philadelphia, and he said it was one of the most revolutionary works of art he has ever seen, that it detailed and showed graphically the atrocities that the whites committed and the resistance that Africans gave to fight. And the focus of the movie was this young student, Serafina, and her ongoing resistance to of the apartheid atrocities and oppression. But then the author of the play sold the movie to a white studio and was given white directors, and they hired one of the biggest Uncle Toms in all of modern history, Whoopi Goldberg, and turned the movie from a movie about a revolutionary students to a movie about Nelson Mandela. And I don't know if you're very familiar, but Del Jones is not a fan of Nelson Mandela. We won't go into that now for time's sake, but he said, they can take our revolutionary works and dilute and destroy them. Public Enemy, Serafina, also Malcolm X. He is not a fan of Malcolm X. Movie by Spike Lee. He goes into many details pointing out the historical and the main thing he said that Spike Lee took too many liberties with Malcolm X's life and doing the Hollywood treatment and writing himself in as a character, things of that nature, that Malcolm X was too important. Well, Del Jones said that the movie should have never been made, that Malcolm's life could not be properly done and his impact could not be properly represented. But even if you were going to do it, he felt that it should have been more historically accurate, more so than sacrificing the history for entertainment value. He also coined this term called vidiots. I actually forgot this in my reread for this presentation, where he said, vidiots are people who watch more TV than they read, who use entertainment media for news, a people who rely on moving pictures to deliver unto them the news, their entertainment, history, analysis of social phenomenon, sex, education, and childcare. That's a vidiot. I know that's going to shoot. When I was reading that, I was thinking, damn, how many, I was trying to like my video, Xbox time, my reading, my TV consumption. I might be in the vidiot box too, but we all got to work on that. He went on to talk about send away their clowns. He actually gave a whole chapter to comedians and comedy because of the significance of comedians to oppressed people. I don't care if you're talking about the Irish under British colonialism, the Indians under British colonialism, everybody's under, or Africans under European and Arab colonialism, U.S. Comedians to give someone who can look at the pain and look at the suffering and give people some laughter and joy and reprieve from that. He really valued comedians. And it's no accident that in the black community, comedians hold a very special place in our heart. You can't go nowhere and say nothing bad about Bernie Mac anywhere in Chicago. So he talks about various comedians, how a lot of times they came on strong and how the culture bandits got their grips in them. They got a little money and a lot of fame and they went off the rails. He talked about Richard Pryor, one of his greatest records that he actually got a Grammy for, talking about Bicentennial Nigga. And in Bicentennial Nigga, he basically talked about the black experience in which such depth and such artistry. And he said, how do you go from that Bicentennial Nigga that was put out in 1976 to the movie The Toy? And if you haven't seen The Toy, make sure you have a very powerful constitution. I saw that movie as a young child. I wasn't even 10 years old when that movie came out. And I remember watching that movie, Wonder Wheel. I never forget that scene. And I thought it was the most funny, wonderful movie. And I didn't have anyone to explain to me what a tragedy. It's literally John Gleason or Jackie Gleason buys, a rich white man buys Richard Pryor to be a toy for his son. And as this rich white man purchases, and his wife, Richard Pryor's wife, is an activist, a freedom fighter. And he hires himself out to be this child's toy. But as being his toy, he's magical Negro. I mean, go watch The Toy if you have such a constitution. Same thing. He said he had, let's move on. I can't. Dick Gregory. He says Dick Gregory's honest, Dick Gregory's insightful, but Dick Gregory was an unapologetic integrationist, kumbaya, let's hold hands and sing. But if you read Dick Gregory's, if you listen to his comedy records, go listen to Frankenstein or Live at Kent State, go read Nigger or go read Callous on My Soul. This man was a man of great insight and depth, but he hit a wall. He couldn't look beyond pray, fasting, and ultimate integration and peace with our oppressors. Keenan Ivory Rayans, he talks about how the devolution of In Living Color, how it was very insightful, very punching comedy, but I don't know how much you can blame Kenny Ivey Wayans because he was at war with, I think it was the Fox network or whatever the broadcast network was for In Living Color. He was at perpetual war with them. He wanted to keep the show punching, but again, you also got, it wasn't Shanae, Wanda, the degrading black woman images, Eddie Murphy. We've talked enough, and Whoopi Goldberg, like these comedians. Well, let's move on. What he says about these personalities. They sell illusions. He says that a movie star is a salesperson. That's what they are to their core and their fundamental purpose. So, there's no way to escape that. Oh, wait a minute. Getting out of page. Oh, let's move on. He talks about, he actually spoke on graffiti people, the walking billboards. We have to understand, I don't care how much your parasocial relationship. And a parasocial relationship is a one-sided relationship, essentially, that is enhanced through digital media and media products. So people really think that they are part of a Bayhive community, that is a real thing that they're a part of, that they can draw inspiration, support, and community to. And people give more or will fight harder for Bayhive. They can see their brother, sister, cousin, mama beat down in the street, and they'll fight harder to defend the Bayhive than they will their own community's interest. So these one-sided social media enhanced relationships that he warns us against, to be mindful of and careful of, that you can appreciate an artist's product without falling for what the artist is selling, especially if the artist is not an ally to the rest of the community in our liberation, but wants to maintain the status quo because that's where they draw their wealth and status. He also talked about anti-African cartoons, and we'll kind of wrap it up here. There's something he says about African children that is so impactful. But let me just go from excerpts from that section. When anti-African animation and cartoons, but I want to read the quotes first. He said, "Remember, we must prepare our children not only to survive their environment, but to liberate it and defend it as they build tomorrow." So many of us are focused on our children's success in this environment, when it should be focused on their giving them the tools, the understanding, the resources, and the inspiration to tear this shit down, not to secure a little section within it. He went on to say, after the Maroons of Jamaica, the Haitian Victory, Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, among others, they decided to end the forced importation of Africans. They said, why not grow our own Africans locally and socialize them to slavery from the cradle to the grave? It is not often said, but they had one hell of a time attempting to make slaves out of Africans from our motherland. Those who knew freedom never gave it up as their natural state and struggled to return to their culture by liberating themselves by any means necessary. That it means something, that they understood that they don't start brainwashing and indoctrinating us when we reach grade school or high school or college. The indoctrination damn near starts from the womb. I mean, if you study epigenetics, which that's a whole nother thing we don't have time to get into, the indoctrination of our people starts in the womb. So we, just as we're looking at adult media with the critical eye, we need to be just as critical of children's media, the media that we allow our children to consume, whether it's made specifically for children or not. And we should always be in conversation and engaging our children about that media. So he talks about Disney and the long history of Disney's racism in many cartoons, blackface and degrading images. Also the same thing about Looney Tunes. When I was a child, I remember Thomas, the black mammy from Tom and Jerry. And I remember the episode they played it on broadcast television where Bugs Bunny went to Africa, put the rings around his neck and the plate in his mouth. And again, I didn't have any adults that really told me about that. I had to figure it out long after I sat and laughed and felt that I was being entertained when I was being indoctrinated against myself. And he goes into detail. Let's just go on one, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because my children love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And Del Jones basically points out, it's not even hidden. You have this Japanese rat that names his charges, his adopted sons, after European Renaissance figures, the highest, most honored European Renaissance figures. Michelangelo, Leonardo, Donatello, and Raphael. Philosophers, artists, musicians, the greatest painters that come out of Western culture, right? Like, why would this Japanese rat hold European culture in such high esteem? They're enemies up until the end of World War II. They're bitter enemies. But not only that, who were their main enemies of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle? Bebop and Rocksteady. Right? One was a boar and the other was a rhinoceros. Two African animals, the wild boar and the rhinoceros. African animals and their names. Rocksteady is a form of reggae. Bebop is a form of jazz. Is that an accident? European high culture versus African and Black American low grade culture. Jazz and reggae was gutter music. Del Jones says that's not an accident. Now I know I joke about tinfoil hats, but I think Del Jones also said it best. Every communicated message or image has a motive, a target, a perspective. They are created by people who come from a culture, possess an ideology, and are discriminating. Therefore, you can throw objectivity out of the window. Everything is hey, throw down the tomahawk. Everything is a battlefront. Everything is a problem until it's proven not to be. We have to be the most critical, discerning. We need to wear the badge of overthinking and hateration. And believe you me, I know there's a lot of rhetoric about stress. But again, you can follow Bro Diallo Media, and I talk about this positivity cult thing. But anyway, we have to, even the most minor forms, throwaway forms of media and presentation, we have to be mindful of. He has towards the end of the book, revolutionary recapitulation, where he says basically he leaves you with the message: criticize anything and anyone. There is nothing above criticism, dissection, scrutiny, and if it is found to have little to no redeeming qualities, eject it. And in the epilogue, Del Jones states, I quote, genocide must be preceded by pitiful propaganda producing a dehumanizing image that creates fear in the other, to join or allow our demise. So what the propaganda is going to do is have people, all people, including us, either to fear us and join our oppressors in the genocide campaign, or to step back and be neutral while our genocide happens. And you think that the propaganda machine cannot coax black people to join? I know you know so many black cops. I know Candace Owens is there. And it's kind of curious, this Candace Owens thing to me, because there's Uncle Tom's much more virulent. From Clarence Thomas to Larry Elder. I mean, I could list literally dozens of, but a black woman being an Uncle Tom seems to. So I guess sex, I don't know. Maybe we can explore that in one of my things. But this is Del Jones stuff. So let's see. He's pre-Candace Owens, so let's not sully his name by mentioning his name. But anyway, that is a review of Culture Bandits Volume 2. I went a lot longer. Sorry, Aroma. I know you got to edit this, and it's going to be. But I got to send out a shout out to all of my Patreons and supporters. A shout out to Phil for your help with resources. Of course, wouldn't be here without co-conspirator number 2, Chauncey. Shout out. I also want to give a shout out. I like to this is Prudence, if you know Prudence in Chicago, Symbolize Me. This what this. I got this bracelet from her years ago. The bracelet I was wearing in the first video, if you go back and watch the first Del Jones, that was from Harriet's Alter Ego. Bought that a decade ago, more than a decade ago, like 15, 16 years ago in Brooklyn, New York. So shout out to Harriet's Alter Ego. If you're still around, shout out to Symbolize Me. Shout out to Prudence. Every now and then we go out and see her around and her beautiful sons. Anyway, so that's it for the shout outs. I guess we could close out. Oh God. Yes. Check out African World Order. You can get, like, this is one of the Bro Diallo promo shirts. You can get Bro Diallo merch, African aesthetics. It goes to help create our media apparatus, fund our farm and urban agricultures, cooperative, revolutionary activities, all that. DialloKenyatta.com. You can also go there for archives of the Bro Diallo show. I don't have any updates on when the Bro Diallo radio broadcast will be up, but I promise you we're going to start putting out more regular content thanks to the support of people like Chauncey and Phil. We're going to be able to produce more content outside until the radio studio is open. Please be safe. Please wear your mask and don't listen to the anti-mask hysteria. Take the necessary minimal precautions to keep yourself and other people safe. Anything else? Am I forgetting? Shout out to Aromo Land Productions, who edits this film. And is that everything? All right, so until next time, we're going to be doing Sex Prisoners, Culture Bandits Volume 3, Sex Prisoners. This was written in 2004, so it's one of his more up-to-date books, where the other two texts were written in the 90s. And then we're going to maybe go on to either Carlos Cooks, or this was a request to review Homosexuality and the Feminization of African Males by Mwalamu K. Baruti. I read this book quite some time ago, so I'm really interested in getting back in it, see what I learned and have learned from the book or have been unlearned from the book. So this might be the next book or Carlos Cooks, but let's just leave that. And I'm going to kind of cluster and stack these up. So subscribe, notifications, all that stuff, because these things are not going to be coming out on a regular schedule. I'm going to kind of enhance because I'm behind on a lot of stuff I want to get out to the community. So I'm going to be putting out some stuff pretty regularly on Diallo Kenyatta YouTube. And, you know, sooner than later, we will be back on AM 1680 Q4 radio. Shout out to the Q4 family. I did read on the Q4 site that they did receive some grant support to help keep the station afloat, because there was a danger of the station never reopening. So anyway, thank you for watching, and I'm sorry it went on a little longer. I will work to keep these things to and under 30 minutes. Say what? You might do a part 2. So this might be a part 1 and part 2, because my son is lazy and doesn't want to edit an entire video. Ain't nothing fun. Anyway, good night, and shout out to Dr. Mingo, who's moral support is always appreciated as well. Anything else? All right. So are you right now? Is the Boogie Down Productions music should be playing, right? I'm pretending to bob my head because he hasn't put it in yet.